Why were her hands shaking if she wasn't afraid? She looked down at them, resting on the cold metal table in front of her. The briefing room hummed with low chatter, the kind of nervous background noise soldiers made when they didn't want to admit they were anxious. Her fingers twitched again, a tremor she tried to hide by curling them into fists. To anyone else it would look like nerves, but she knew the truth. It wasn't fear making her tremble. It was the weight of too many lives pressing against her shoulders. The colonel's voice cut through the air, clipped and sharp. "We move at 400, no delays." Everyone straightened, eyes forward, pens scratching over notepads. She stayed still. She already knew the mission details. The map on the screen wasn't new to her. She had studied it in silence the night before, long after everyone else had left the room. She couldn't sleep anyway. Not when her mind replayed the same thought. If I fail, it won't be just me who pays. They didn't look at her when the briefing ended. No nods, no smiles, not even the courtesy of acknowledgement. She had gotten used to that, being the quiet one, the outsider, the one people respected in silence but rarely approached. A sniper, a ghost. She didn't mind the distance. What she minded was the memory of the last time she had trusted someone here and how it had ended. Her gear was already packed. She checked it anyway. One last time. Then one more after that. It wasn't compulsion. It was survival. She knew that the smallest oversight, a single loose round, a cracked scope lens, could decide whether she lived or whether her team came home draped in flags. "Lock and load," the sergeant barked as dawn crept over the horizon. She pulled on her gloves, adjusting them until the seams aligned perfectly with her palms. The rifle slid into her hands like it belonged there. Heavy but familiar, she exhaled. The tremble eased. For a moment her hands were steady. The helicopter ride was filled with the kind of silence that spoke louder than words. The engines roared, the wind clawed at the fuselage, but inside everyone was locked in their own thoughts. One of the younger soldiers, Ramirez, kept staring at a photo in his lap. She didn't have to look twice to know it was his daughter. He folded it neatly before anyone else could notice, but she had. He caught her glance, then looked away quickly, embarrassed. She didn't say a word. But she filed the image away, in that hidden part of her mind where she kept reasons not to fail. The mountains rose like jagged teeth beneath them. Dust swirled up as the bird descended. The pilot's voice crackled in their headsets. 2 minutes out. Watch your 6. Her heartbeat slowed. This was the part she lived for, the transition between noise and silence, between planning and reality. Her mind sharpened into lines and angles. Every movement, every breath measured. Boots hit dirt. The world went quiet except for the crunch of gravel. She scanned the ridges, scope sweeping. Nothing, no movement, but she knew better. Silence in enemy territory was never just silence. The team pushed forward single file. She stayed at the rear, rifle raised, eyes scanning the distance. One step, another, her breath in her chest. She didn't think about home. She didn't think about the night terrors that came when missions ended. She thought only of the task, the angles, the geometry of life and death. "Clear," whispered the point man. They fanned out, securing the small compound ahead. Doors kicked in. Shouts. Dust motes in the morning sun. She took a rooftop position, sight locked on a far ridge. The wind tugged at her hair, and for a heartbeat she was a child again on a shooting range, her father's voice steady in her ear. Control the breath. Let the world slow. She hadn't thought of him in years. She didn't want to. A crack split the air, not hers, an enemy round. The soldier next to Ramirez went down hard, clutching his leg. Screams tore the silence. The squad scattered to cover, shouting coordinates. Her hands did not shake now. The rifle pressed firm against her cheek, her eye finding the glint of metal high on the ridge. One breath in, one breath out, squeeze. The rifle bucked and the figure collapsed in the distance. The world froze for a moment. Just her, the smoke, the sound of her own heartbeat. Then chaos returned. The wounded man groaned, blood seeping through his uniform. "Medic," someone shouted. She slid down from the rooftop, boots kicking dirt, landing beside him. She wasn't a medic, but she knew pressure could save a life. Her gloves pressed hard against the wound and his eyes locked onto hers. Wide, frightened, young, too young. "You're fine," she lied. "Stay with me." His lips trembled. She could feel the heat of his blood seeping through her gloves. For a moment it wasn't his face she saw. It was another. Someone she had tried to save once before. Someone she had failed. Her throat tightened. She pressed harder. She wouldn't let it happen again. The medic arrived, shoving her aside gently but not unkindly. She stepped back, hands stained red, watching as bandages wrapped tight and morphine calmed his screams. She wanted to breathe relief. She couldn't. Not yet. Because the ridge wasn't empty. And she knew, deep down, the first shot had only been the warning. Hours bled into each other. The compound was secured, but tension crackled in the air. Her scope swept again and again. Each shadow a possible threat. Each silence a scream waiting to break. That night as the team settled in, Ramirez sat near her. He didn't say much. None of them did, but after a long pause he whispered, "He's gonna make it, thanks to you." She gave a small nod, nothing more. She didn't need thanks. She didn't want it, because deep inside she feared what they didn't know, that saving him had awakened something she had tried to bury. The mission wasn't over. The real reason they were here hadn't even begun. And the secret she carried, the one tied to why she had volunteered for this mission, why her hands shook when no one was looking, was still burning inside her, waiting for the right moment to surface. But not yet. For now she sat in the dark, rifle across her lap, listening to the wind scratch against the walls of the compound. Her gloves were stiff with dried blood, and her hands trembled again. Not from fear. From the weight of lives balanced on her shoulders. What if the silence was the enemy's greatest weapon? She lay on the rooftop again, the night pressing in around her. The stars were sharp pinpricks above, the kind of sky that should have been beautiful but wasn't. Not when it sat above a place like this. The others slept in shifts. The medic dozed with his back against a wall. Ramirez leaned against his pack, staring at the picture of his daughter again, lips moving silently, maybe a prayer. She didn't sleep, couldn't, the silence gnawed at her bones. The mission brief had been simple on paper: secure the compound, extract the informant. But she knew simple was a lie. Simple meant something was missing, something no one was saying out loud. She had volunteered anyway, and she had her reasons. The wind shifted. She stilled, rifle pressed to her shoulder. A shadow moved near the ridge. Her breath caught. Then nothing. Just the desert shifting, the world settling, or maybe not. She didn't relax. The tremor in her hands returned, faint but steady, a reminder of what she carried. Behind her, boots crunched softly, a voice. "You ever sleep?" She glanced back. It was Harper, the squad leader. Broad shoulders, eyes tired but sharp. He didn't wait for her answer, just sat down beside her, rifle resting across his lap. "Used to think silence meant peace," he muttered. "Then I realized it just means someone waiting to break it." She didn't reply. Words weren't her strength. Watching was, listening was. Harper studied her face in the dim light. "You're different out here," he said quietly. "Cold, but steady, like you've been carrying something heavier than the rest of us." She stiffened. He was too close to the truth. But he didn't press. He just leaned back, eyes on the stars. "I used to play piano," he said suddenly. "Back home. Couldn't sleep without touching the keys. Even here I can almost hear it sometimes." She blinked. Piano. She tried to imagine it. Fingers pressing ivory, music filling a quiet room. Not war, not silence, something human. And for a brief second she wanted to tell him. About the letters she kept folded in her pack, written in a neat, careful hand. About the voice that used to read her bedtime stories when she was a child. About the hospital bed she had sat beside for months, whispering promises she hadn't kept. But she didn't. She just adjusted her rifle and said, "You should get some rest." Harper gave a half-smile, stood, and walked off without another word. The silence closed in again. Morning came with fire. The first explosion tore through the compound's wall, shaking dust into the air. Shouts erupted. Boots scrambled. She was already moving, rifle in hand, before she was fully awake. Another blast. Smoke, screams. "Incoming, get cover," someone yelled. The world narrowed into fragments. The stench of burning concrete, the whistle of incoming rounds, the crack of gunfire. She moved through it like she had 100 times before, body low, eyes sharp. She found her perch, dropped to prone, and scanned. Their muzzle flashes on the ridge. She exhaled, squeezed. One down, another. The rifle was steady. Her heart was not. Each pull of the trigger brought a face to her mind. Faces she had tried not to remember. The firefight dragged on, minutes stretching into hours. The team held the compound, barely. The medic shouted for bandages, Harper barked orders, Ramirez returned fire with shaking hands. Through it all, she stayed quiet, each shot measured, precise, final. By the time the last shot faded, the sun was high and merciless. The compound was scarred, walls blackened but still standing. They had survived, for now. She sat against a wall, hands trembling again, not from exhaustion, from the weight pressing down harder with every mission, every shot. Ramirez dropped beside her, sweat streaking his dirt-covered face. "You saved my ass again," he said, voice shaky but grateful. She shook her head. "No, you saved your own." He frowned at her like he wanted to argue, but instead he pulled the photo of his daughter from his pocket. "Her name's Sophia," he said softly. "She's 6, thinks I'm some kind of superhero." His eyes burned with something between pride and guilt. "Truth is, I'm just hoping I make it home in one piece." Her throat tightened. She looked away. She couldn't tell him what she wanted to, that being called a hero was just another kind of lie, that the people who came home carried ghosts heavier than body armor. That she, too, once had someone who thought she was invincible. But that story wasn't for him, not yet. Later that night, Harper called them together. His face was grim. "Intel changed," he said. "Our target isn't in this compound. He's been moved, which means we move too." A ripple of frustration passed through the squad. They were exhausted, battered, already carrying more weight than anyone should. But orders were orders. She felt her stomach twist. Of course the target wasn't here. That would have been too easy. And nothing about this mission was ever meant to be easy. As the squad dispersed to pack up, Harper stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. His voice was low. "You volunteered for this mission. Why?" Her chest tightened. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She could have said duty, could have said orders, but he would have seen through it. He was already seeing too much. So she just said, "Because someone has to carry the weight," and walked away before he could ask more. That night she dreamed again. The hospital room, the smell of antiseptic, the faint hum of machines, a voice, weak but steady, whispering, "Promise me you'll make it mean something." She woke with her heart pounding, her gloves damp with sweat. She pressed her hands together hard until the tremor passed. The team moved out before dawn. The desert stretched endless before them, shadows long and sharp in the rising sun. She walked at the rear, rifle ready, eyes scanning the horizon, each step heavy, each breath weighted. And in her chest, the secret burned hotter. Not yet, she told herself, not yet. But soon. Why did the desert always feel louder at night? Every step crunched on loose gravel, every breath echoed too sharply inside her chest. The squad moved in silence, shadows stretched long beneath the pale moon. Their boots sank into dust, rifles low but ready. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, twice, then went quiet. The kind of quiet that pressed against your ears until you thought you'd go mad. She walked at the rear, scanning the ridges with her scope. Nothing moved, but she didn't trust that. She never trusted silence. Not anymore. The convoy had been rerouted, Harper explained earlier. Their target, an informant carrying information that could stop an entire offensive, was being moved east. If they missed him, thousands could die. That was the official reason. For her, it was more than official, it was personal. She hadn't told them yet. Not Ramirez, not Harper, not anyone. The secret sat like a stone in her chest, heavy and unyielding. Every mile they marched, it grew heavier. She had volunteered for this mission not because she wanted to, but because she needed to. Because the man they were chasing wasn't just a name on a file. He was the one connected to her father's last mission. The mission no one talked about anymore. The mission that had left her sitting in that hospital room, holding a hand that would never squeeze back. The wind shifted, she froze. Her rifle swept left, scope tightening on the ridge. A flicker, movement too fast, too small. Her finger tightened on the trigger. A goat, just a goat, scrambling across the rocks. She exhaled, forced her shoulders to loosen. But inside, the tremor returned. Not from fear, from memory. The squad stopped at a ruined village by dawn. Crumbled walls, collapsed roofs, sand piled in doorways. Harper raised a fist, signaling halt. The men spread out, cautious. "Stay sharp," he whispered. "We don't know who's here." The place smelled of dust and smoke. Ash clung to the stones as if the fires had burned not long ago. She stepped into what had once been a home. A child's toy lay half buried in the rubble, a stuffed bear with one button eye missing. She picked it up slowly, brushing the sand off. Her throat tightened. She had once had a bear like this. Small, brown, worn. Her father had brought it back from deployment when she was 6. She still remembered the way he had tucked it under her arm at night, whispering, "It'll keep you safe when I can't." She placed the toy gently back where it lay. Her hands trembled again. Outside, Ramirez crouched near a burned-out wall, running his fingers over graffiti scrawled in fading paint. "You ever wonder if they hate us more than they fear us?" he asked softly. She paused, maybe both. He looked up at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, but still searching. "I don't want Sophia to grow up in a world where kids draw soldiers on walls because that's all they see." She didn't answer. What could she say? That the world didn't change just because we wanted it to. That no matter how many missions they completed, the cycle kept spinning. She kept her silence. Harper's voice broke through the moment. "Movement, North Ridge." Everyone snapped to position. Rifles raised, heartbeats quickened. She dropped prone, scope tight on the ridge. Figures moved in the distance, 3, maybe 4, armed, watching. "They're not attacking," Harper murmured. "They're watching." Her finger hovered near the trigger. She could end it now. Stop the threat before it grew, but something in their stance, it wasn't aggressive. It was cautious, almost fearful. Harper made the call. "Hold fire, we move." The squad slipped out of the ruins, keeping low, pace quick. The watchers didn't follow, not yet. By midday, heat pressed down on them like a weight. The desert shimmered, air bending in waves. They found brief cover under jagged rocks, rationing water in silence. Sweat carved paths through the dirt on their faces. She leaned against stone, eyes closed, trying to shut out the memory of the hospital. The machines beeping. The voice whispering, weak but steady, "Promise me you'll finish what I couldn't." Ramirez sat beside her, breaking the silence. "You got anyone waiting for you?" Her chest tightened. She opened her eyes slowly. "No." He studied her, searching for cracks. "You don't strike me as the type who fights for nothing." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The silence stretched. Finally, he nodded as if he understood and pulled out his daughter's photo again. "She thinks the world's simple, black and white, good and bad. Wish I could believe that again." She stared at the picture, at the little girl's smile, and for a heartbeat she saw herself, younger, innocent, believing her father would always come home. A crack echoed across the desert, not close but close enough. The squad snapped alert. Sniper fire. Harper swore under his breath. "Positions now." They scrambled to cover. She slid into prone, scope searching. The shot hadn't hit, just a warning. Her finger tightened, scanning the ridges there. A glint. She zeroed in, steady breath, squeezed. The rifle kicked, the glint vanished, silence followed. But silence was never just silence. The squad held still, waiting. Minutes dragged, nothing. Finally, Harper waved them forward. "We keep moving, they're testing us." The sun dipped low by the time they reached the canyon. The walls rose high and steep, shadows deepening. Every instinct screamed at her that it was a trap. She scanned the ridges again and again, but saw nothing. Harper gave the signal. They entered. The canyon swallowed them whole. Footsteps echoed against stone. The air cooled, thick with dust. Every sound was magnified, the clink of gear, the scrape of boots, the whisper of fabric. Halfway through, the first shot came. It ricocheted off stone, sparks flying. Then chaos. Gunfire from above bouncing between canyon walls, shouts, scrambling, dust clouds rising. She dove behind a boulder, heart slamming, scope up, eyes sharp. Muzzle flashes flickered high on the cliffs. She squeezed off shots one after another. 2 figures dropped. A third ducked back. "Pin down the ridges," Harper shouted. Ramirez returned fire, cursing under his breath. The medic dragged a wounded man into cover, blood streaking the canyon floor. Her hands didn't tremble now. They were steady as steel, each shot precise, each kill necessary. She forced herself not to think of faces, just angles, targets. The firefight raged until dusk swallowed the sky. Finally, silence fell again. Real silence this time. The squad regrouped, battered but alive. 3 wounded, none dead, for now. Harper wiped blood from his cheek, breathing hard. His eyes met hers. For a moment he just looked, not with suspicion, with something else. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "We keep moving," he said quietly, "but we're running out of time." She nodded, rifle heavy in her hands. Her gloves were torn, her palms raw, her body ached. But inside, the weight pressed heavier than ever. Because she knew something the others didn't. The man they were chasing wasn't just carrying information. He was the reason her father never came home. And she had sworn in that hospital room that she would finish what he couldn't. Even if it killed her. What happens when you realize the mission is not about the mission at all? The canyon walls still echoed with ghosts of gunfire as the squad pushed forward. Every footstep crunched on loose gravel, every breath felt stolen. They moved slower now, battered from the ambush. The wounded leaned on each other, bandages dark with blood. The medic whispered encouragement, though his own face was gray with exhaustion. She stayed at the rear, rifle sweeping, eyes cutting through shadow. The desert night closed around them, swallowing sound. And in that silence, the truth pressed harder in her chest. This wasn't just another mission. It was her father's unfinished war. The others didn't know, couldn't know. If they did, they'd question her judgment, question her motives, maybe even pull her off the mission. So she carried it alone like she carried everything. The weight of lives, the tremor in her hands, the promise whispered in that hospital room. Ramirez stumbled ahead of her. She caught his arm, steadying him. His face was pale, sweat dripping. "I'm fine," he muttered, though he was. She said nothing, just tightened her grip until he steadied. His eyes flicked to hers for a second, gratitude flickering there, then gone. By dawn, they reached the outskirts of another ruined village. Harper raised a fist, signaling halt. The squad dropped low, eyes scanning. The place was silent, too silent. "Check it," Harper ordered. They moved in carefully, rifles raised. Empty homes, shattered windows, ash on the wind. It was a graveyard, not a village. She entered one of the homes, boots crunching on broken glass. A table lay overturned, chairs splintered. On the wall, faint handprints smeared in dust. Small. A child. Her throat tightened. She turned away quickly, but the image burned into her mind. Another memory clawed up, unbidden, her father's last leave. The way he had lifted her onto his shoulders, spinning her in the yard until she laughed so hard she couldn't breathe. The promise he had whispered when he hugged her goodbye. "One more mission, then I'm done." He hadn't come back. Harper's voice snapped her back. Found something. The squad gathered in what had once been a school. The walls were pocked with bullet holes, the floor littered with torn notebooks. On the blackboard, chalk words still faintly visible. Tomorrow will be better. Beside it, scrawled in fresher paint, a message in the local tongue. The interpreter among them read it aloud. Death follows the convoy east. Silence. It wasn't intel, it was a warning. Her stomach tightened. She knew it wasn't random. The convoy, the informant, the man tied to her father, he was close, too close. The squad rested briefly, rationing what little food and water remained. Ramirez sat beside her, pulling out his daughter's photo again. His hands shook as he held it. She drew me a picture before I left, he whispered. Me and her, holding hands, sun in the sky, grass under our feet, simple. His voice cracked. I don't know if I can ever give her that. She swallowed hard. For a moment she wanted to tell him that she had once drawn a picture like that too. A little girl holding her father's hand, sun blazing above. But the sun had set long ago. Instead, she said softly, "You'll try, that's all that matters." His eyes searched hers. And you, who do you try for? Her chest tightened. She almost told him, almost, but instead she looked away. Keep your eyes on the horizon. He nodded slowly, sensing the wall she had built. He didn't push. By afternoon, they moved again. The heat pressed down mercilessly, the desert shimmering. Every step was a battle. Thirst clawed at their throats, dust caked their skin. But they pushed on, driven by Harper's voice, steady and unyielding. Then the shot came. It cracked through the air, sharp and merciless. One of the soldiers dropped instantly, a hole in his chest. Chaos erupted, shouts, scrambling, muzzle flashes from the ridge. Contact, Harper roared. They dove for cover, bullets kicking up dust around them. She dropped prone, scope sweeping. There, a sniper, half hidden behind rock. Her breath slowed, finger tightened, squeeze. The rifle bucked. The figure toppled. But there were more, too many. The squad fought tooth and nail, every shot a desperate plea to survive. She shifted positions, firing, moving, firing again. Her hands were steady now, each kill precise. But inside, the weight grew heavier. The medic dragged another wounded man into cover, blood streaking across his arms. Ramirez fired blindly, cursing, eyes wide with fear. Harper barked orders, voice hoarse but unbroken. She climbed higher, boots slipping on loose stone until she found a vantage. From there she could see the enemy line. Dozens, more than they could handle. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't random, it was a trap. She squeezed the trigger again and again, dropping targets, buying seconds. But seconds weren't enough. Then silence. The enemy pulled back, vanished into the ridges as quickly as they had appeared. The canyon floor was littered with shell casings and blood. The squad staggered out from cover, battered, bleeding, but alive. 2 dead, 3 wounded. Harper's jaw clenched, eyes burning with fury and grief. They knew we were coming. No one answered, because they all knew what that meant. Someone had betrayed them. She stayed silent, but inside, the truth gnawed at her. She knew why the enemy was always one step ahead. Because the man they were chasing wasn't just an informant. He was playing both sides. And she had known it before they even left base. That was her secret. That was why she had volunteered. Harper's eyes met hers across the blood-stained canyon. For a long moment neither spoke, but she saw it in his gaze, suspicion. Not accusation, not yet, but the beginning of questions. That night the squad buried their dead in the desert soil. No markers, just mounds of earth. The wind howled low, carrying dust across their faces. Ramirez stood with his daughter's photo pressed against his chest, whispering something she couldn't hear. Harper stayed silent, eyes fixed on the horizon. The medic's hands shook as he patted the dirt flat. She stood apart, rifle slung across her back, hands clenched into fists. Her gloves were stiff with dried blood. Her chest ached with the weight of the promise. She whispered into the wind so quietly no one else could hear. "I'll finish it, Dad. I'll finish what you couldn't." The night swallowed her words whole. Why was it so hard to breathe when the desert air was wide and endless? Maybe because silence pressed harder than bullets ever could. The convoy had left 2 hours ago, dust trails fading into the horizon, but she lingered behind with a smaller team. Orders were clear. Secure the forward listening post, assess damage, hold until relieved. Simple words, but nothing about this night would be simple. The cracked radio tower loomed like a skeleton against the twilight, its metal ribs bent by artillery. The compound had been silent when they arrived. No return fire, no signs of life. That silence unsettled her more than gunfire. Gunfire was predictable. Silence was a question left unanswered. Her boots sank into soft sand, crunching on shattered glass as she moved deeper into the ruined outpost. Her rifle hung close to her chest, finger resting lightly on the guard. Not tense, just ready, always ready. A medic named Tors whispered behind her, "Feels wrong, doesn't it? Like walking into a graveyard." She nodded, not turning, because it was a graveyard. The walls told stories, bullet holes etched like stuttered punctuation, dried blood painted where men had fallen. The kind of place that remembered more than it should. She pushed forward, heart steady, eyes sharp. Yet inside she couldn't ignore it, the tremor in her hands, not fear, never fear, but the weight, always the weight. They found the first body near the generator shack. Slumped against the wall, helmet tilted, rifle untouched at his side. His eyes still open, staring at nothing. Tors muttered a prayer. Another soldier, Ramirez, crouched low and checked the man's tags, his jaw clenched. Not ours. Enemy uniform, but young, too young. She knelt beside him anyway, studying his face. He could have been 17, maybe 18 at most. Dirt smeared across his cheek, lips cracked from thirst. His fingers clutched a crumpled picture, family, 3 figures smiling in a field. She closed his hand gently over it. No speeches, no judgment, just a silent acknowledgement he was somebody's child. The others looked at her, maybe expecting orders, maybe expecting coldness. Instead she whispered, "We move," quiet, eyes sharp. They pressed on. Inside the main barracks the air was heavy with dust and iron. Beds overturned, gear scattered, but something caught her eye. A single candle, melted halfway, sitting on a crate, burned recently. Someone had been here, maybe still was. Her breath slowed. She raised her fist, signaling halt. The team froze. Every sound magnified, the tick of cooling metal, the rustle of sand shifting in the wind. She scanned shadows, corners, blind spots. Her pulse didn't race, it narrowed, focused. This was the rhythm she knew best, the edge between discovery and disaster. Then came a noise, small, fragile. A cough. Not a soldier's cough, softer, raspy, human, civilian. She moved toward the sound, weapon steady, pushed open a door. Inside, huddled in the corner, were 2 figures. A woman clutching a boy who couldn't have been older than 10. Their eyes wide, terrified, their breaths shallow. Her team shifted behind her, instinctive tension rising. "Ma'am," Ramirez began, but she lifted her hand. She lowered her rifle slowly, kneeling to meet their eyes. Her voice softened. "We're not here to hurt you." The boy flinched, burying his face against his mother's chest. The woman whispered something in broken English, trembling, "Please, no more." She swallowed hard. This wasn't in the mission brief. Civilians never were, but war didn't care about neat lines on paper. War always bled outside the margins. She reached into her vest, pulled out a canteen, and slid it gently across the floor. The boy's eyes darted to it, hesitant. The mother hesitated too, then finally reached out, hands shaking as she pulled it close. Tors stepped forward. "We can move them out, bring them back to the convoy." But she didn't answer right away, because something gnawed at her. Why were they here? Why had they stayed in this ruined outpost when everyone else was gone? The woman's gaze flicked nervously toward the far wall, where a steel hatch lay half buried under debris. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. She caught it, the look, the hesitation, the secret. She stood slowly, nodding at her team. Clear that hatch. They moved fast, lifting rubble, prying open the rusted door. A hidden tunnel stretched downward, darkness swallowing its end. Her chest tightened. This was it. This was why the silence felt heavy, why the compound seemed wrong. "Ambush point," Ramirez whispered. "No," she murmured, shaking her head. Her instincts hummed sharper than his words. This wasn't about soldiers waiting in the dark. It was about something else. The boy whimpered, clinging tighter to his mother. Her voice was steady, but inside it cracked like thin glass. They weren't hiding here by choice. Torres frowned. Then what? The answer came too soon. From below the hatch, a faint echo, a clatter, movement. And then a cry. A baby's cry. Her team froze, confusion flickering across their faces. She alone felt the surge of clarity. This wasn't a weapons cache. This wasn't an ambush. It was a shelter, families, refugees, maybe dozens of them. Her breath caught, because now the mission wasn't clean anymore. It wasn't black and white, it was human. She leaned against the wall, the tremor in her hand stronger than ever. Not fear, the weight, the unbearable weight of choice. Because command wouldn't want them here. Civilians complicated things, slowed operations, created risks. But she wouldn't turn away. Her thoughts flickered back to a memory. A kitchen table, her father's rough hands setting down a folded flag, her mother's voice breaking as she whispered, "They said it was for the greater good." She remembered being 14, standing alone in that silence, swearing she'd never let another family feel like hers did. That promise had carried her through training, through deployments, through nights of staring at ceilings too heavy with ghosts. And now it was here, the test, not in a firefight, not against an enemy, but in the quiet space between orders and conscience. She exhaled slowly. "We get them out," she said finally. Her voice didn't shake, it was iron. Ramirez frowned. "Ma'am, that's not." She cut him off. "That's not a request, move." The team exchanged glances, then nodded reluctantly. Because they knew. Deep down, they knew her resolve was unbreakable when it mattered most. They began guiding the woman and boy toward the exit, careful, watchful. Torres glanced back at her, whispering, "Why do you always take the weight?" She gave him a tired smile. "Because someone has to." The wind outside howled louder, carrying with it the faint rumble of distant engines. Relief forces, or something worse, she couldn't tell. But one thing was clear, the mission had changed. And so had she. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt something fragile flicker inside her chest. Not victory, not pride. Hope. How do you carry lives that aren't written into the mission brief? How do you protect people who aren't supposed to exist in your commander's reports? These questions pressed harder on her than the rifle at her chest as she led them out of the barracks. The woman clung tightly to her boy, eyes darting at every sound. Behind them, Ramirez scanned the horizon with uneasy jerks of his rifle. Torres kept close, whispering reassurances no one truly believed. The desert stretched endless, night settling like a veil. Stars bled across the sky, brilliant and cold. The convoy that had left hours ago was long gone, but the dust of its passing still lingered in the air. She raised her hand, the group halted. She crouched low, brushing her fingers through the sand. The faint vibration beneath her palms wasn't natural. Engines, more than one. Her pulse steadied, iron calm on the outside. Inside it twisted. Who was it? Reinforcements or hunters? She gave a silent signal. Her team fanned out, eyes scanning, movements careful but tense. Torres leaned close and whispered, "If it's theirs, we're exposed." She nodded, and if it was theirs, the civilians would be taken, interrogated, forgotten. Her mind raced. She had defied orders once tonight, and it felt like the beginning of something larger, something she might not walk away from. She gestured toward a rocky outcrop nearby. Shelter, temporary at least. They moved quickly, guiding the woman and child. Sand shifted under boots, each step louder than it should be in the vast silence. The engines grew louder, closer. They reached the rocks just as the first headlights pierced the dark. She pressed her back against stone, rifle raised, peering out. 3 trucks, markings foreign, not allies. Soldiers jumped down, scanning with flashlights, rifles ready. Their voices carried on the wind, low, sharp, commanding. Her team crouched low, breath held. The boy whimpered, muffled against his mother's chest. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, eyes steady, urging silence. He froze, wide-eyed, tears glistening in the starlight. The patrol spread out methodical, searching, looking for something or someone. She clenched her jaw. If they found the tunnel, if they found the hidden civilians still inside, it would be a massacre. Ramirez's whisper was sharp. We can't hold them all off. Torres looked at her, voice shaking. What do we do? She swallowed. The decision wasn't tactical, it was human. We lead them away, she said quietly. Her team stiffened. Ramirez hissed, that's suicide. She looked at him, eyes hard but calm. Better us than them. Silence heavy. Then Torres nodded without hesitation. They moved like shadows, slipping through the rocks, creating noise just far enough to draw attention. A snapped twig, a scrape of boot, deliberate, controlled. The enemy soldiers turned, flashlights slicing the dark. Voices rose, commands barked. Footsteps followed. Her team darted into the open desert, hearts hammering, breaths burning in their chests. Behind them, shouts grew louder, engines revved, headlights swung like predators searching for prey. Sand kicked up around their boots. Bullets cracked the night air, sharp and sudden. The boy's scream echoed from the rocks, but his mother pulled him down, safe, hidden. They ran, not to escape, but to pull danger away. Her lungs burned, but her focus narrowed into a razor line. Each step was a choice, each heartbeat a countdown. The tremor in her hand steadied, not gone, but transformed. Not weakness, purpose. Ramirez panted beside her. We can't outrun trucks. She glanced toward a ravine ahead, dark and jagged. Shelter, or a trap, didn't matter. It was all they had. They dove in, sliding down rough stone, scraping arms and knees. Dust choked the air. They pressed against the walls, weapons raised, breaths sharp. The truck screeched to a halt above, headlights scanning the ravine. Soldiers shouted, boots pounding on rock. The chase was closing in. Torres leaned close, whispering, We're not making it out, are we? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the cliff above, on the beams of light hunting them. Inside, her chest ached, not from fear, from acceptance. Finally, she whispered, Maybe not, but they will. Torres' eyes glistened. He nodded, lips tight. Ramirez looked away, jaw clenched, silent fury masking his fear. They waited. The night stretched thin, each second brittle as glass. Then a sudden flash, flare overhead. The ravine lit crimson. Shadows leapt across stone. Soldiers shouted, closing in. Gunfire erupted. Rocks splintered, dust raining down. Her team fired back, precise, measured, not desperate, never desperate. The echoes roared like thunder, a brutal symphony of survival. Her shoulder jolted as a round ricocheted close, stone slicing her skin. Blood ran warm, sticky. She didn't flinch. She returned fire, calm, steady. Each pull of the trigger deliberate. Each shot a sentence in the story she refused to let end here. Torres cried out, clutching his leg, blood spilling fast. She grabbed him, dragging him against the rock, hands pressing hard to stem the flow. His teeth clenched, breath ragged. Don't you dare quit, she hissed. He gave a weak smile. You always carry the weight, huh? Her throat tightened. She pressed harder, eyes stinging. Then let me carry this too. Above them, the enemy regrouped. More footsteps, more shouting. They were surrounded. Ramirez's face was pale in the red flare-light. "We're done." She shook her head. Not yet, not while breath still filled her lungs. Her mind raced, options dwindled, choices narrowing to one. "Smoke," she whispered. Ramirez blinked. "What?" "Your grenades, all of them, now." His eyes widened. Then he understood. He pulled the pins, tossing them into the ravine's mouth. Thick plumes erupted, choking, blinding. Confusion spread above. Shouts turned frantic. Bullets sprayed wild. "Move," she commanded. They dragged Tors deeper into the ravine, disappearing into smoke and shadow. Steps staggered. Muscles screamed. But they kept moving. The world above dissolved into chaos. Finally, after what felt like hours, the noise faded. Only wind remained, carrying sand across their faces. They collapsed in the dark, breaths ragged, bodies shaking. Alive, barely. Ramirez laughed bitterly. That wasn't survival, that was madness. She leaned against the stone, sweat and blood streaking her face. Sometimes they're the same thing. Silence fell again, heavy but different, not threat, not yet. Tors groaned, pain sharp in his voice. "We can't keep this up. We need extraction." She nodded, but extraction wasn't guaranteed. Command didn't even know they were still out here, and if they did, would they come? Her chest tightened at the thought. She had made her choice. Saved civilians instead of following orders. In the cold math of war, she might already be expendable. The tremor in her hands returned, stronger now, but still not fear. It was the weight, always the weight. And as she stared up at the narrow strip of stars above the ravine, she wondered if carrying it alone would break her, or make her unbreakable. How long could silence last before it turned into a verdict? In the ravine, hours felt like days. The smoke had drifted away, leaving the air raw and stinging. Her team huddled in the shadows, exhausted, bleeding, broken, but alive. For now. Tors shifted, wincing as the makeshift bandage on his leg darkened with blood. His voice cracked. "We can't stay here. They'll circle back, sweep the whole sector." She knew he was right. The quiet wasn't safety. It was a pause before the storm. Ramirez wiped grit from his face, his tone edged with frustration. "We should have stayed with the convoy. At least we'd still have comms, medics, a plan. Instead, we've got nothing but a bleeding man and a commander who—" His words cut off when he saw her expression. Calm, steel, not angry, just unflinching. "Say it," she murmured. Ramirez's jaw clenched. He spat into the dirt. "You broke the mission, and now we're paying the price." The words hit harder than the gunfire. Not because they were untrue, but because he believed them. She felt the tremor rise again in her hands, that familiar vibration she could never shake. Not fear, not anger, the weight. She leaned her head back against the cold stone, eyes on the sliver of night sky above. "We didn't break the mission. We found the part they left out." Tors let out a pained chuckle, shaking his head. "Always carrying more than they give you." The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Finally, she reached for her radio. The cracked plastic pressed rough against her palm as she adjusted the frequency. Static hissed. She breathed deep, steadying herself before pressing transmit. "This is Echo 2. We've encountered civilians at Grid Sector Delta 4. Multiple non-combatants, including children. Repeat, civilians present. We require immediate extraction." The static answered back, nothing else. She tried again and again, same silence. Until finally a voice crackled through, familiar, commanding, distant. "Echo 2, copy. Negative on extraction. Mission parameters do not include civilian transport. Secure the area and await further orders." Her throat tightened. She stared at the radio, words cutting deeper than any bullet. Ramirez muttered, "Knew it." Tors cursed under his breath. "They're not coming for them." Her pulse slowed, heavy and deliberate. She pressed transmit again. "Command, say again. Civilians will not survive without extraction. Request immediate override. The reply was sharp, final, negative echo to hold position, do not compromise operational integrity, that is an order. The line went dead. Her fingers clenched so tightly around the radio it groaned under the pressure. She lowered it slowly, chest burning. For a moment no one spoke. The desert wind filled the gap, whistling faintly through the ravine. Ramirez broke first. That's it, we've done what we can. We follow orders, we hold. She looked at him, really looked. The anger in his eyes was just fear in disguise, fear of being forgotten, fear of dying for nothing. Torres coughed weakly, voice ragged. What are you thinking? Her answer was quiet, that orders aren't always right. Ramirez swore, don't start this again, you're going to get us all killed. Her gaze didn't waver. Maybe, but if we do nothing they die anyway, and we live with that. Ramirez shook his head, packing the small stretch of rock. You think command cares about 3 ghosts in the desert? We'll vanish into paperwork. No one will remember. Her voice sharpened, cutting through his words. Then we remember, that's enough. The conviction in her tone silenced him, for a moment. Tor's hand found hers, weak but steady. If we move them, how? Trucks are still sweeping. Radios are shot, and I'm not exactly sprinting. She closed her eyes briefly, pulling in a slow breath. A plan formed, fragile, desperate, but alive. There's a dried riverbed that cuts east, she murmured. Runs past the canyon, toward the old supply route. If we move under cover of dark, we can make it. Ramirez's voice was low, disbelieving. That's 20 clicks with civilians with him, he gestured at Torres. We'll never make it. Her eyes locked onto his. We don't have to make it clean, we just have to make it far enough. The silence hung again, this time like a choice laid bare. Finally, Torres gave a tired laugh. Guess we're running after all. She smiled faintly, brushing grit from his sleeve. Guess we are. The next hours blurred into movement. Painful, grueling, relentless. They crawled out of the ravine under a moonless sky, guiding the woman and her boy, Torres leaning heavily on her shoulder. Each step burned, but they pressed forward. The desert stretched wide, cruel, and endless. The wind cut sharp. Sand bit at exposed skin. Every sound felt magnified, the crunch of boots, the rasp of breath, the distant hum of engines still prowling. But what stayed with her wasn't the danger, it was the boy. He walked beside her, small hand gripping his mother's tightly. His eyes, wide and dark, never left her face. Not with fear, not with trust, something deeper, as if he was waiting to see if she could truly carry the weight she claimed she could. And that look, it reminded her of another face. A girl, younger, in a hallway with peeling paint, clutching a folded flag to her chest, herself, all those years ago. She swallowed hard, pushing the memory down, letting it burn into fuel. Hours bled into dawn. The horizon glowed faintly with first light, painting the sand in muted gold. They stumbled into the riverbed, its cracked floor stretching like a scar through the desert. But relief was short-lived. A low rumble echoed across the canyon walls. Engines, close, too close. Ramirez swore under his breath, they're tracking us. She pressed Torres against the rock, guiding the woman and boy behind cover. Heart pounding, she peered around the edge. Dust rose in the distance, 2 trucks, armed, closing fast. Her breath steadied, this was it. The choice was no longer looming, it was here. She looked at her team. Ramirez, trembling with rage and exhaustion. Torres, pale, bleeding, still managing a crooked grin. The woman, clutching her boy like he was her whole world. And the boy, eyes locked on hers, waiting, believing. Her hands trembled again, not from fear, from the weight, the unbearable, inescapable weight of carrying them all. She whispered, more to herself than anyone else, we hold here. Ramirez's eyes widened. Are you insane? We can't. She cut him off with a glance, not harsh, just certain. Sometimes you don't move forward, she said softly. Sometimes you stand, right here, right now. The trucks roared closer. Dust swallowed the dawn. She raised her rifle. And for the first time in years, the tremor in her hands disappeared. The dawn came not as a sunrise, but as an unfolding of silence. For hours, the battlefield had been nothing but chaos, metal clashing against metal, roars swallowed by smoke, the deafening chorus of machines and mortals tearing at each other. Now, as the last of the enemy's banners crumbled into ash, the world seemed to pause, as if afraid to breathe. Captain Alina Vey sat against the shattered hull of what had once been her command vehicle, her army shirt clinging to her with streaks of dust and dried blood. The sleeves were rolled halfway, revealing bruises that painted her skin like muted battle honors. Her rifle rested across her lap, not as a weapon now, but as an anchor, a reminder that she was still here when so many were not. Around her, the remnants of her squad gathered, faces smeared with ash, uniforms torn, eyes hollowed by exhaustion and grief. Yet in each pair of eyes there was also something unbroken, something fierce, the refusal to let the fallen be forgotten. Alina tilted her head back, staring at the pale daylight breaking through cracks in the smoke. It wasn't a beautiful sky. It was scarred, heavy with the ghosts of fire and gunpowder. But to her, it was alive. "Roll call," she whispered, her voice rough, almost swallowed by the wind. One by one, names were spoken. Some answered with weary hands raised. Others were met with silence. Each silence was a knife, but none sharper than the moment when Private Marin's name was called. Alina's throat locked. Marin, who had been barely 18, who had joked about wanting to learn how to bake once the war was over. Marin, who had taken a shot meant for Alina just hours ago. Alina closed her eyes. "She's here," she said softly, as if speaking it could make it true. "She's here in all of us." The squad bowed their heads. The enemy had called themselves conquerors. They had arrived with the arrogance of those who believed history was theirs to write. Yet in their attempt to bend humanity, they had uncovered something they had not calculated for, the human will to endure, even in the face of impossible odds. Reports trickled in from other fronts. The enemy had retreated, fractured. Humanity's defiance had not only held the line, it had turned the tide. For the first time, the invaders had tasted fear. But to Alina, victory was a hollow word. What did it mean when the ground was littered with brothers and sisters who would never rise again? What did it mean when the laughter of her squad would forever be missing voices? Later, when the medics arrived, Alina refused treatment until every one of her surviving soldiers was seen first. Her wounds ached, but pain had become something distant, something she carried like a shadow. She was not ready to put it down. She stood in the ruins of the hangar that had once been their rally point. The walls were cratered, daylight spilling through gaps where missiles had torn the steel apart. Dust floated in the beams like fragile constellations. Her hand brushed across the wall where, weeks ago, her squad had carved their names. The etchings were still there, though some letters were scored through by shrapnel. She traced them with her fingers, stopping at Marin's. "You said you'd bake us bread," Alina whispered. A tremor slipped into her voice, but she let it stay. For too long she had held back the flood. Now she allowed it to come. Tears carved new paths down her face, clearing the grime from her skin. She wasn't ashamed. Every drop was a verse, a remembrance. When the news networks finally transmitted humanity's counteroffensive across the globe, the footage of Alina's squad, the exhausted, dirt-streaked soldiers standing defiantly against the ruin, went viral. They became symbols, not of power, but of resilience, of ordinary people who had chosen to fight when the world demanded surrender. An old veteran who watched the broadcast murmured, "They're not just soldiers, they're the voice of the forgotten." And he was right. That evening, as the sun dipped and painted the wreckage in bruised orange light, Alina gathered what was left of her squad atop a ridge overlooking the battlefield. They lit no fire. The horizon still smoldered enough for them. Instead, They shared silence, broken only by fragments of memory. Corporal Reese spoke of the time Marin had made everyone laugh so hard during drills that even the commander had to hide a smile. Lieutenant Kova recalled how Elena had once stitched a wound in the dark with nothing but trembling hands and unshakable determination. Others spoke, too, of moments small yet infinite. Elena listened, her heart both breaking and stitching itself back together with each word. When all had spoken, she rose. The breeze caught her hair, tangled and heavy with soot. Her voice, though raw, carried. "We are not the heroes of this war," she said. "The heroes are those who will never stand beside us again. But as long as we live, as long as we breathe, their voices live too. And one day, when this world is rebuilt, when children run in fields without fear, it will be because we carried those voices forward." Her squad rose with her. No applause, no cheers, only a solemn nod, the kind of oath that needed no ceremony. As the night deepened, Elena stood apart, staring at the stars just beginning to pierce the smoke. For weeks, the sky had been drowned by war, but now it was returning. Faint, fragile, but undeniable. She thought of Marin, of all the lost, of every whisper silenced before its time. Her rifle was still heavy across her lap, but for the first time she didn't feel like it chained her. She felt like it had become a part of the story, an artifact of survival, of resistance. The war was not over. There would be more battles, more scars, more names to carve into the wall of remembrance. But Elena knew, deep in her bones, that something had shifted. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were not prey, that even in their most fragile moments, they carried an iron resilience no empire could crush. And when the time came, when future generations asked what it meant to fight for Earth, they would not speak of strategies or weapons. They would speak of the forgotten voices carried forward by soldiers who refused to let silence win. Elena looked to the horizon, where smoke curled like fatting ghosts, and whispered, "We are still here." The wind carried her words across the field, weaving them into the ashes, the rubble, the sky itself. A message for the fallen, a promise for the living. And for the first time in too long, the sky answered, not with fire, not with silence, but with the quiet, steady pulse of stars.